7 months and 14 days ago, these children boarded a plane in Africa and flew alone to England. Their parents promised they would see them soon. That was on February the 9th. 20 days later, one of the hastiest acts in the history of Parliament was forced through. It left the children with British passports on one side of the law, the parents with Indian passports on the other. For 7 months, they've survived, fending for themselves among the Indian community in a London suburb. There are many more like them. These are just 7 of February's children. Joginder, 17. Santosh, 15. Hermish, 14. Kamlesh, 12. Sabdish, 11. Gurmeet, 9. And finally Amrik, 8. February at Nairobi Airport, Kenya. A mass of Asian people, fearful for their future in an increasingly hostile community, struggle to book passages to Britain. Within 2 or 3 days, the Commonwealth Immigrants Bill will become law. The debate is bitter. The bill means breaking a promise that Asians living in Kenya would automatically be allowed into Britain if the Kenyans didn't want them. The promise was broken on February the 29th. The 7 children beat the deadline. Their parents couldn't.
We came here for education, and as we were holding British passport, we came here. They were forcing us to take the Kenyan citizenship or to leave the country. So as we were holding British passports, we came here. So my parents, as they weren't holding British passports, they sent us here. And my parents, they were going to come soon after us, but when the passports would have been ready. But suddenly the law broke that they weren't, they can't come here. Well, I really felt very much because since I was born, I used to stay with my parents, and I never, I was never out of sight of them. And it was so sudden that I had to leave them and come here alone without them.
Did your father or your parents make any preparations for you before you left?
Yeah, they did. They packed our things and made us, some warm clothes and all that. But I think it was quite a responsibility for them that they were sending us alone. But they couldn't help it because their passport weren't ready. Otherwise, my father would have come with us.
What did your mother feel, seeing all her children go away?
She was saying, just take care of you and write her soon and all that. Well, anyway, she was weeping.
Did they make any preparations for your stay in England?
One of my cousins, he wrote a promising letter to my father that he'll look after us. And my father, trusted him, and he sent us here. My cousin, when he saw us, that we are 7 of us, he said that he was very sorry that he can't look after all of us. So my cousin, he found us 2 rooms. Now where we are living, he found us those 2 rooms, and he said that now I'm not going to look after you, and I'm going to write to your parents, and you have to take care of yourselves.
Abandoned by their cousin, himself only 17, the children organized their lives around 2 rooms without complaint and without outside help. The conditions were very cramped, but they worked out a highly efficient routine. Their parents sent a monthly letter to them, still promising to come. But they refused to talk to World in Action last week in Nairobi. They appeared frightened that talking might jeopardize their chances of finally getting a work permit to enter Britain and rejoin the family. Without their father, Jacinda had to work and Santosh ran the home.
My cousin used to work in a factory. He told the sergeant that I've got my cousin here and she has come from Kenya and all that. And so, he kept her.
Had she ever worked before?
No, never.
What did she think about that?
Well, sometimes, she really feels that it is horrible coming in here. Because in Kenya, my mother used to do every work. And now here it is all of us that we have to do each and every work. And I think so she feels, she doesn't feel like working. And because she was, studying in there. And so suddenly she had to work in here, so I think it's quite hard for her.
What does she feel about giving up her studies?
Well, sometimes, she grumbles that it is all my parents' fault that they've sent 6 of us with her. But, then when she realized that it is not, that she can't help it, then, she just stopped saying anything. Otherwise, sometimes she really grumbles.
All the welfare services available in their suburb somehow passed them by until the end of July. Then, by chance, a social worker discovered them, Mrs. Mary Dines.
When I was told about the children, and I was told by, in fact, a voluntary organisation about them, I was amazed to think that, in fact, 6 of them had been at school since February, and nobody had, in fact, wondered what was happening to them at home and had taken the trouble to check up.
Don't you think it was irresponsible of the parents to allow the children to come on their own?
I don't think, really, that it is irresponsible of the parents, because they feel, you see, that they've come to the end of the road in Kenya. There's no future for them there. They're very anxious. The children are extremely well educated as it is. They're very anxious that they should go on with their education and do the best possible for themselves. And quite honestly, the parents obviously felt that this was more likely to be achieved in Britain than in Kenya.
But then why do the parents have Indian passports?
Well, there seems to be some misunderstanding there. The father could have applied for a British passport at the time of independence and failed to do so. The children themselves are not quite clear why, because they were all registered as British citizens.
Only now are the facts becoming clear, how the Act divided families, stranding children without fathers, mothers without children, and in some cases, children without any parents at all. This weekend, the Home Office was sceptical about the situation and said they had no evidence. But last week, an investigation by the Committee on United Kingdom Citizenship indicated 3,000 children are involved. The investigation was conducted by Mr. Martin Ennals.
One of the whole tragedies of 1968 in terms of Commonwealth relations and the Immigration Act is that at no stage was ever any effort made to try and find out exactly how many people were involved or what would result from the action taken by the government. They didn't know in this country or in Kenya how many people would be affected by the Commonwealth Immigrants Act. They didn't know when they passed the Act how many people affected, in fact, wanted to come here. But you still get pockets of tragedy which have been created by the Act, where children are divided, where parents can't come because of other provisions of the Act, and sometimes even the children cannot go back because of the restrictions imposed by the Kenya government.
The life of the 7 children in the 2 rooms is, in fact, no pocket of tragedy. It's cheerful. Jacinda, the 17-year-old, is the breadwinner. She's up at 6. Santosh, the 15-year-old, takes over till Jacinda gets back at 8 p.m. Fears that they will be split up and sent to homes have prevented Mary Dines discussing the children's case with the Home Office, except in general terms. Yet, without the children's names, the Home Office can do nothing. So they carry on alone, with Mary Dines available for emergencies. With a family of her own and 1,000 other welfare problems, Mrs. Dines has become their legal guardian, but can do little more.
The wonderful thing, I think, is the way, in fact, the children are managing to look after themselves. The eldest child working where she has never been to work before, she was still at school. And the next one, who is at school, coming home and cooking and looking after the younger ones.
How do you feel with all this responsibility on you? Because you're only 15.
Yeah, but I can't help it, I have to do it until my parents come.
Do you mind it?
No, not quite, but I feel it.
In what way?
I feel like, I feel that my parents would be here.
It could be 2 years before they come. over to join the children because the only way in which they can legally join them is by the father applying for a work voucher to work here, and there is a backlog of about 2 years on work vouchers. There's another problem here because sometimes by the time a work voucher is granted, the job has gone, and this could happen in any case. So the situation isn't very bright for this family at all, unless the Home Office are prepared to say that this is a compassionate case and make an exception. Well, when I discussed the case of these children with the Home Office, they said to me that the parents were irresponsible and that surely the children ought to go back to join their parents. You know, this is extremely difficult. They couldn't, of course, go back now because they wouldn't be readmitted because they have British passports.
I think the government has shirked its responsibility and has avoided responsibility. I think it's been quite positive about this. It has avoided responsibility for citizenship, and having created obstacles, it has absolutely failed to make any attempt to try and solve the problems they've created themselves. These are people who have always thought of Britain as being their mother country, and they have British passports. They've always been citizens of the United Kingdom and colonies. It wasn't something they opted for. They didn't choose to be British subjects. They are British subjects. And so families like this came over here in February before the Act actually came into effect, and are now separated from their families because of the barriers which the British government has put up. Now, in this particular case, which we've been talking about, the children are here, and they are British subjects. They're perfectly right and entitled to be here. But their families, their mother and father, happen, by the course of history, to have Indian nationality. They are therefore restricted under the Commonwealth Immigrants Act of 1962, and they would therefore be prevented from coming here until such time as the waiting list brings their name up to the top, which will probably be 2 or 3 years, it may be even more.
This is what life could mean to Jacinda for the next 3 years. For 8 hours a day, sometimes 10, she stitches boxes. The cousin found her the job. After that, the children had to do everything for themselves. They knew nothing about England and the way it worked. Everything in their dreary suburb was unfamiliar, yet they managed. They even wrote to the education authorities, fixed their schools, and found their own way to them. It was education which made many of the Asian parents in Kenya send their children to Britain in a rush. Last summer, the Kenyan government started to edge Asian children out of the schools, reserving 80% of the places for Africans. The flow of children to England began in September. In February, with the British legislation threatening them as well, the parents panicked. All that mattered was to get the children to Britain. The problems would have to be sorted out later. In Jacinda's case, it didn't work. In Kenya, she was a schoolgirl with her O-levels a year away. In England, she gave up her education to stitch boxes.
I started the course of London GC O-level, but the way I looked, the life was too difficult for us, so I have to finish there only, my studies.
How do you feel about the fact that you've had to stop your education to look after your other sisters?
See, I was so surprised about it when we came here that I have to left my studies and work because of this difficult life. I can't say anything about it.
What would you have preferred to do?
So I just wanted to do London GCO level and start with some other occupation, I mean, like nursing or doctory like this. But I couldn't because I just left my studies in between.
So now what is your future?
Because till now I can't tell what is my future. I just think that till my parents can't come, I will work in the factory only.
And look after your sisters?
Yes.
By skipping lunch and pocket money, Jacinda manages to bring home £10 a week. With Jacinda away at work, the family revolves around Santosh. She has to cope with all the other children, all the domestic chores, and still find time to study for O-levels next year. The 2 rooms cost them £6 a week. £1 goes on milk. With the £3 that's left, Santosh feeds the 7 of them. According to the rules, they shouldn't be living this way. But everybody who knows them fears the alternative. There's no public tribunal to look at cases like theirs, or any way of appealing against official immigration decisions. The decisions are made inside the ministries. Their choice is to lie low and stay together, or to go to the authorities and risk splitting up. Their diet is mainly flour, butter, milk, potatoes, onions and cereals.
How often do you eat meat? How often in the last 6 months have you eaten meat?
I think in 6 months we have eaten only 5 times, not more than that.
It doesn't seem very, you have a lot of any fun.
Well, we have sometimes, you know, especially on Saturdays and Sundays, sometimes, but not mainly. Sometimes I take my sisters to the park and we play there. And sometimes, you know, we just stay at home and amuse my sisters and all that.
But don't you miss not going to the pictures?
Yeah, we really do miss, but we can't help it.
Why not?
Because we have to pay a lot of money for 7 of us. And I think we can't afford it.
Santosh, do you think it's a good thing for the 7 of you to look after yourselves?
No, it is not a good thing, but we can't help it because my parents were going to come and we never knew that the law was going to break. But I think it is quite a big responsibility for us to look, you know.
Don't you think it would be better if you went into children's homes?
No, that wouldn't be at all nice because, no, we miss our parents so much and you know, we don't like being separate. And I think it would be horrible, you know, if we live separate. Because now we are 7 of us and, you know, if someone is, you know, just sad, we just cheer him or her up. I mean, just tell her or him that cheer up, that mom and dad will be coming soon. But if we'll be separate, then nobody's to cheer my sisters up because they're too small.
But supposing your parents don't come, Santosh?
Well, we are trying so that, you know, they can come. I hope that they will come here soon. But we don't want to be separate.
The alternative to keeping the children living together, even in rooms, is for them to be split up in children's homes. And I think the first thing we have to remember is that Joginda, who is really the head of the family while she's here, would not be able to be in a home with the other children. Now, the important thing is, of course, to keep them together. They're a very happy, close-knit family, and it would be quite disastrous to have them split up in different homes in the care of a local authority. I think this would be extremely detrimental to the family and the last thing that the children themselves would want.
This, of course, is a question which really should go to the local council social service. The local authority and the council social service will be asked and expected to do something to take the children.
Yes,
they'll be forced to go into care. You know, this is the tragedy of the situation, that we are in fact forcing children to break up from being a family, to be put into the hands of other people who possibly don't speak their language, certainly don't understand their culture, and brought up in fact as lost children. Whereas the answer is so simple. The parents could come to England, and this would solve the whole problem, take all the responsibility off the local authority. It would reunite the family, and would in fact be a normal, humane gesture, which we would expect in any other country. And it doesn't seem to happen here.
Santosh, don't you think that your father, by asking Mrs. Dines to look after you and be your guardian, is shedding his responsibility?
Well, I know he is, but he couldn't help it because he was going to come, you know, when his passport would have been ready. But suddenly the law broke out that he couldn't come. So it is not his fault, I think so.
Their precarious life in their 2 rooms came to an abrupt end 10 days ago. It was probably just as well. At least 14 people shared one kitchen, bath and lavatory in the house they lived in. Their landlord was a man of unpredictable temper. He became very angry when the children talked to Weldon Action. He told them to get out of his house. He never wanted to see them again. They were evicted, illegally, with 5 days' notice. They are now living elsewhere.
He said, no, I don't want to see your faces. You just get out of my house.
Tell me, at times like this, don't you wish you had your parents with you?
Yeah, we really wish. And we really miss them.
Do you think if they were here, this would happen?
No, never.
What do you miss most?
Parents, nothing else. You know, if your parents were here, we needn't, worry about anything. And we wouldn't be bothered, you know.
It's not impossible for the parents to come. No, I don't think anyone should get away with that impression. It's not impossible. The parents can come to this country. All the minister has to do is to say they can come to this country. All you need to do is provide compassionate agreement. And the Home Office has discretionary power. It can allow anyone to come to this country. Look what happened in the last 3 weeks when we had a crisis in Czechoslovakia. Immediate arrangements were made, and I was delighted that they were, to enable Czechs who felt they couldn't go home to stay here, and Czechs who felt they had to come here. We're talking about 2 people in this case. We're talking about perhaps 300 or 400. We're not talking about the thousands whom we anticipated from Czechoslovakia, or the thousands who came from Hungary. We're talking about British subjects, British Commonwealth citizens. And the numbers are immaterial because they're so small. And it's simply a matter of a discretionary decision to be taken by Mr. David Ennals.
Ironically, Mr. David Ennals, the Home Office Minister responsible for immigration, is the brother of the impassioned Martin Ennals. A statement to Weldon Action by the Home Office this weekend brought hope for these children. Their parents could be allowed to join them once they had all the facts. The Home Office said ministers were committed to looking sympathetically at all compassionate cases. They had introduced the Act, they said, reluctantly, after careful consideration. They would examine sympathetically the cases of any other of February's children. And that, of course, is a promise.